meeting you right where you are on your foster care journey. This is the Forgotten Podcast.
Welcome to the Forgotten Podcast, where we are sharing the stories of the foster care community and offering hope and practical help for your foster parenting journey. Today, I am so happy to have back on the show Trent Taylor with us from Watch Me Rise, which is a ministry in North Carolina that focuses on supporting and educating families on the impact of trauma. He serves as a trauma consultant, a TBRI practitioner, a life coach, board-certified master mental health coach, mentor, educational therapist, and parent trainer. Trent is here to help people, and he does this in so many ways. Trent, thank you for being on. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. It is a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, well, you've been on this podcast a while back. It was actually episode 132 of the Forgotten Podcast, so I encourage our listeners to go listen to that. But that really, you detailed out your story of your foster care journey and what a redemptive story that was. So I really encourage our listeners to share. Today, though, we're going to tackle a really difficult topic, yet one that is incredibly and unfortunately relevant to all of our kids, really in today's world, but one that our kids who've experienced trauma are particularly vulnerable toward. I want to state up at the front, this episode may not be appropriate for younger listeners, so parents, just use your judgment, because today we're going to be discussing how to talk to our kids about pornography. We know that pornography use is a pervasive issue inside and outside of the church, and that all of our kids now today have easy access to this. So today's going to be an open conversation, and one that I will say will end with hope, but we are going to talk through the challenges as well. So Trent, let's get started, and let's take it right down to the basics so we're all starting from the same point. Define pornography. Tell us what it is and why it is so addictive.
Absolutely. So, the definition that we often use when we're talking about pornography is really any material, images, videos, books, writing, whatever it is, that's created with the intent to elicit or cause sexual arousal. So, that is often the definition that we use when we're speaking about pornography. And why it's so addictive, there are so many reasons I feel like, that research has really touched on. But some of the basic reasons why it's so addictive is one, when we look at pornography, when we look at material that's stimulating, it floods our brains with dopamine, which is the neurotransmitter that is responsible for rewards, right? It's the reward pathway in our brain that says, hey, that felt great. That, I want some more of that. And when we are looking at something like pornography, we are basically our brains are dumping that dopamine in, and the more we watch, the more dopamine that we need, the more we have to watch to continue to get that dopamine hit
Same hit.
that we're looking for. And also, there were some other reasons why it's so addictive is because it kind of causes, these habitual loops, right? The more we watch, the more we need to watch to get that dopamine, which then causes our tolerance to go up and up and up, just like any other substance abuse or alcohol abuse addictions that we are often facing. Not only that, but it causes, or really allows us to escape. It's a quick, instant escape from pain. It allows us to numb out when things are too tough. It unfortunately serves as a maladaptive coping mechanism that a lot of people begin using it for, because we can log on and we can start looking at stuff, and it's just like we kind of, for a moment, we forget everything that is troubling us or that is hard. And, some other reasons why this stuff is really so addictive outside of, what it does neurochemically, what it's doing, with, causing us needing more and more, is that, for those who have insecure attachments or broken relationships in their past, it kind of creates this false sense of intimacy or connection, or at least the illusion of having control over that. So when you combine all of those different things, it's no wonder why people who are engaging in pornography become so stuck in it.
Yeah, and that was really my next question is, is why. So you've answered that a little bit, but if there's anything else to add, why are kids who've experienced trauma more susceptible?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we know that children who have experienced early childhood trauma, myself included, right? Our downstairs part of the brain, that's our survival, that's our primitive part, right? That's our fight, flight, freeze responses, everything that keeps us alive, that overdevelops. Because when we're in stressful and traumatic situations, the only thing our brain has capacity for is survival. How do I get my needs met? How do I make it throughout the day? How do I keep alive, essentially? And then what happens as a result is that the upper part, or the prefrontal cortex responsible for impulse control, self regulation, and everything else that we need to be successful and functional in our day to day life, gets underdeveloped. Because when we're in those traumatic situations that a lot of our kids that we serve for, adoptive foster parents are serving, are, the upstairs brain is underdeveloped because they never had a
Mhm.
chance to step outside of that survival mindset. And why kids who have experienced, trauma or any kind of, abuse, neglect, whatever it is, why they're more susceptible, honestly, is because for some of the reasons that I mentioned, why it's so addictive. Attachment,
Mhm.
right? We know
Yeah.
kids from hard places often struggle with attachment. So they are seeking connection and they're trying to find it in ways that we know as adults are not healthy. But for them, and honestly for me, partly was that it allowed me to have a sense of control, right? This false sense of connection that I could
Mm.
shut off at any point I wanted to when things got too tough. Because oftentimes being vulnerable, opening up my heart was just, it was too hard. It was too painful because
Mm.
I had seen so often that the adults in my life just weren't trustworthy. And not only that, but due to the upstairs part of that brain, right, where the impulse control is, due to that being underdeveloped, their impulse control is not where it should be, right? And then also their ability to self-regulate, unfortunately, it's just they never got the chance to develop the skills that they needed. And what pornography does is it allows for that instant relief, right? It's that instant distraction, instant escape. And the stimulation is so intense that it really does, it kind of steps in as a self regulator for them, keeping them from ever really learning how to manage their stress. And not only that, but the more pornography that we are viewing, the more it hinders our ability to self regulate, the more it messes with our moods. And then it adds secrecy, that adds shame, and then we need to seek more pornography to escape from that, and it just keeps getting us more and more stuck.
Yeah.
Also, if we look at it for any child who has experienced early childhood sexual abuse, that was me, right? Part of the
Mm.
sexual abuse that I experienced was early exposure to pornography beginning at the age of 2 years old. That was part of the
Mm.
grooming process my biological uncle did. And so we know that when there's been a history of sexual abuse, that makes it that much, makes them more susceptible to it, whether they have been exposed to it as part of the abuse, whether they've heard things about it, right? It kind of awakens the body way before it was ever meant to, which then gets their minds leaning more towards that direction, trying to figure out and trying to honestly make sense of what has happened.
Wow. Yeah. First of all, thank you for being willing to talk about this. I know that you are actually passionate about talking about this message. And like you've already started to share, you have your own personal journey with it. But I just want to also say, I am so sorry that you were exposed to this and to the abuse that you've gone through. I mean, age 2 is horrific. Any age is
Mm.
horrific. But I just want you to know that, like, I am really sorry that you faced that, and I know that you've had healing, and I wish you didn't have to go through that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I appreciate that. I really do. And like you said, God has been so good in my life, and He has allowed me to come to dramatic levels of healing. And not only that, but He's allowed me to be able to have been avoidant of pornography and essentially, parted away from it for well over a decade now. And He has just been so good in my life. And honestly, when I look back, and honestly, what I tell people whenever we do trainings specific to technology and pornography addiction is that out of everything that I went through, the neglect, the domestic violence, the multiple movements through foster homes, And even, the sexual abuse itself, it was actually the pornography exposure that was the worst.
Hmm.
Because when I was away from my abusers, I didn't have to think about them. I didn't have to talk about them. I didn't have to do anything related to them if I didn't want to.
Mm.
Whereas we know with pornography, and especially with how crazy technology is growing nowadays,
Mhm.
it's everywhere. It's 24/7 access. I mean, we have, phones that live in our pockets. It's like a portal to the digital world whenever we want. And we know it's running rampant among our kids. It's running rampant among our churches and our
Mhm.
caregivers and everyone. Unfortunately, pornography is not one of those things that discriminates. It doesn't care how old you are. It
Mhm.
doesn't care
Right.
whether you're male or female, right? It's everywhere. And it's a struggle that so many people face. But unfortunately, not enough people are willing to step up and talk about it and bring
Hmm.
this into the light because we know that at the end of the day, God is going to bring this into the light at some point, right?
Mhm.
There is nothing that is going to remain in the darkness. At the end of time, right? God is going to
Mhm.
come back and bring everything that was once in the darkness into the light. And I feel like He has really placed this calling on my life to help bring this particular issue, among other ones, but this one in
Mm.
particular, into the light to help people know that you're not alone in this struggle. This is not something that you have to fight alone, right? This is not just, let's lock all the tech away, right? This is a heart battle. This is a mind battle. And this is a battle for, our heart for our children, our heart that, we have for God. It's spiritual warfare. It absolutely is. And Satan loves to use this particular thing to keep us kind of bound in shame, bound in fear that if anyone finds out, they're not going to love me or that something's bad's going to happen. And it keeps them stuck continuously in this. So I just want to say thank you again for allowing this topic to be something that we share, that we tell people, how can we help? What can we do? And to honestly just provide hope that you're not alone and that healing is possible. It's not easy, it's not quick, it takes a lot of time and intentionality, but it is possible because we know that everything through Christ is possible.
Hey, friends, it's Jamie, just popping in here for a minute to say we love to hear from you. And it's really important to us that what we're bringing to you is actually helping you, is meeting felt needs. Would you give us a rating and review or contact us directly and just let us know how we are being helpful, but also, are there ways we can be more helpful to you? We want to hear from you. We're encouraged by you and we're here for you. So thank you for taking a few moments to do that for us. And now let's head back to the episode. Well, we're going to talk about recovery and healing, but we're actually going to back up first and talk about the harder parts of
Mhm.
how did your early exposure actually lead you to addiction?
Absolutely. So, as I mentioned, I was exposed at the age of 2. I had no idea what it was. I had no idea that there was anything wrong with it. It just what I had grown up with. It had become my unfortunate normal. And so what happened was, as I was going through multiple foster homes, I was pretty young, so I didn't really have much access to technology until I was about, say, between 8 and 10, honestly. And at that point, I was in my pre-adoptive home, and there was one day that, I was on my grandparents' computer and, just recalling the things that I had seen from when I was 2 years old, or just recalling the things that I had heard during the times that I was abused. And just out of that curiosity, just not knowing that it was wrong, kind of just going with what I thought was just normal stuff. And I think to a degree, I think I knew that, maybe it wasn't quite something that I should be doing because I remember there were times in which I would try to, hide it, obviously,
Mm-hmm.
but I didn't fully understand the damage that it was causing. And so that led to definitely a struggle for quite a while. But like I said, once my parents kind of found out what was going on, they really began to kind of help me discuss through this, kind of understanding why this isn't okay. Why do we not want to be engaging in this kind of stuff, and really kind of pouring into me and in my own value and my own self-worth and helping me
Mm.
see myself as valuable enough to not want to seek that kind of stuff, to not want to deal with that. And I'll say this, it was definitely a struggle. It wasn't one of those things where after one conversation it just went away, right? Unfortunately, it's just not that simple. It's something that we had to talk about time and time again, and there were multiple times in which I would be fighting in this war and I would lose a battle here and there, just like everybody else. But my parents always encouraged me that no matter how many mistakes that we make, we can always pick up and keep moving forward. So I will definitely say that, that exposure at 2 years old definitely led to a struggle for quite a while. But through God's redeeming grace, He helped break those chains that were holding me bound.
And what I'm hearing too is through your parents, it was brought into light over and over and over. Was that something that how did that get started that they found out? Was that something you shared with them? Was that something they found? How did, like, those conversations get started and then continue?
Yeah, absolutely. So my parents found out because my grandma was there was one time that I kind of was being a little secretive, and my grandma was kind of wondering, like, it didn't seem right to her. So she logged on the computer. She had seen some of the things that I'd put in there from the things that I had seen and been told from my past, right? And so from there, she told my mom. And then I know my mom internally, she was probably freaking out, like, oh my goodness, like how, like, we had no idea, right? Because when they first got us, they didn't even know we had experienced sexual abuse,
Wow.
right? They weren't aware of a lot of the things that we had gone through. So that was definitely a big shock. But I remember so clearly, there was one day I came home from school and, she sat we sat down on the back porch with my dad too, and they kinda just asked me, gave me the choice to, kinda own up to it. At first, we're like, "So, we heard that, some things happened at, grandma's house, on the computer. Do you wanna talk about that for a minute?" And of course, my first reaction is like, "Oh my goodness, I'm caught.
Yep.
That means that I might get sent packing," because I had learned over time that if my behaviors were too much, if there was too much, that I was doing, that I'd get sent packing. So that was my first fear. And of course I was entered into a freeze response. I didn't really know what to say. So then they calmly kind of continued on with saying, so, your grandma told us that there were some things that she saw on the computer that weren't appropriate, right? And we just want to talk about this with you. And it really that honestly, their calm demeanor on the outside, because again, I know they were probably panicking on the inside, but on the outside, that calm demeanor really helped put me at ease to know that, this didn't mean that I was gonna have to pack my bags and go, that this was something that they wanted to help me with. And they actually said those words like, "We wanna help you with this, right? We don't want to put shame on you. We're not here
Wow.
to judge you. We're simply here to guide you because we love you and we know your value and we want you to know that as well." And so I really feel like from there, it just kind of continued the conversation. After they realized that that was a struggle for me, they kind of were a little bit more, keeping a closer eye on, when I was on technology, kind of just checking in periodically, keeping the conversation open. Because I feel like sometimes when we talk to parents, the mistake that they make is they have this one big conversation and then that's it. Right, and what we need to do is we need to keep the conversation open. We need to keep checking in, keep seeing, what's going on. We need to keep kind of being aware of, what our kids are doing on their devices because, obviously we want our kids to feel like we trust them. But when it comes to technology, it's just one of those things that we can't give them that sense of privacy with that because, some things can happen so quickly
Yeah.
and they can go down these rabbit holes and go in these downward spirals so fast that we don't even realize it. And so we have to stay on top of things. And the way we do that is we don't approach it like, I don't trust you. I'm going to monitor everything you're doing. It's more like we're a part of a team and we keep each other accountable and we're in this together. And I'm doing this because I love you. Right. And, I want to set a good example and I want you to have healthy relationships as you get older. And I don't want this to be a struggle for you. And that's some of the other things that my parents told me. It was like, we don't want you to struggle with this for the rest of your life, right? We want to help you heal from this.
Yeah.
So it was really a whole like we're doing this with you, not against you because we want you to heal. It was all about investing in me as a person and my own heart that I think was
Yeah.
so helpful and beneficial. And again, that calm, non-judgmental demeanor that was super helpful. And of course, the times in which, I would mess up and they would find out, they would, obviously say again calmly, I'm really sad that this happened because, we want what's best for you. Again, kind of separating the behavior from who I was as a person. Because for so long, I felt like my behaviors, the lies that I believed about myself, that I'm not good enough, I'm unworthy, all of that began to build my identity. And by them separating behavior from who I was, helped to kind of dismantle that false sense of identity that I had built in my trauma, and helping me know that, hey, you made a bad mistake, but you are still lovable. We love you. You're a great kid. We're doing this because we know you can do better. And we know that God has got some bigger plans for you, right? And we don't want this to be an ongoing struggle for the rest of your life. And so really just investing in me and coming from the perspective of that this does us no benefit, right? Monitoring what you're doing, checking in with you helps them in no way. So just reminding me constantly everything they did was simply because they love me and not for control.
Wow. That's incredible. And what a humility and like trust that they were having in the holy in our holy God, to and just to remember like it is, yeah, to not shame you for it. Like what would have happened had they come to you in a different way with like, I can't believe you did that. That's terrible. That's disgusting. Like what would that
Mhm.
have done to you had they come in kind of with that opposite posture of you really messed up?
Yeah, no, I tell you what, that would have immensely added on to the shame that I was already feeling. Once I had known that they had figured out what was going on, and like I said, to a degree, I knew that it probably wasn't okay, but I didn't know the full extent of what was actually wrong with it at the time. And so if they had come in with that shame-based approach, it would have just fed into every lie that I already believed about myself. It would have further deepened that my behaviors make me who I am, and not just that my identity is not separate from that. And it would have, honestly, I probably would have just gotten better at hiding it. I would have been like, well, if this is the way it's going to be, and if this is how you see me, then I just won't talk about it. Right. And I think that would have honestly pushed me more into needing that escape. And at the time, I was still learning how to regulate myself. How do I manage all of these stressful feelings and these painful memories? Because we know God did not create us to be able to handle all of the difficulties that come with experiencing early childhood trauma. And so I would have kept a lot more things to myself. My healing probably would have been a lot slower than it was as a result of just feeling like I can't bring things to my parents. So I am so grateful that my parents did not have that approach, because it really would have just kind of pushed me further into what I'd already been believing, rather than pushing me out of the pain and into the truth and in the newness that God was wanting for me.
So right now I'm thinking of a listener who's hearing this and now they're dealing with a lot of shame because they're like, "Oh, I've done it that way. I've done it the wrong way. I've freaked out. I've gotten angry. Like, now what? What do I do? How do I restore?"
Yeah, no, that's a great question, and I feel like, I mean, the thing is, we're human, right? And anybody who knows the damage that pornography does on ourselves, on our self-worth, on our relationships, our future relationships, and just how we relate with ourselves and with ourselves to God, right? We know the damage that it does. And of course, that is likely to be an initial reaction, because we're like, oh my goodness, we often know the kind of struggle that this will then lead to. And that's the last thing that we want for our kids, especially for our kids who've experienced trauma, because we know they've already been through so much. They're already struggling with so much, to unpack so much already. And so I would say, for those who did have that maybe shame-based approach, or maybe that initial freak out on the outside rather than internally, I would say just show yourselves grace. We're human. And I would also say, when it comes to attachment, being able to make that repair, being able to go to your child and say, hey, I am so sorry for the way that I
Yeah.
responded in this situation or that situation. It does so much for attachment, because it shows that child that, hey, you know, first of all, I'm modeling what it looks like to make those repairs, to, have, that time to come and say, "Hey, I'm sorry. I messed up. I shouldn't have said that. Can you forgive me?" Not only does it model that for that child and how we want them to approach those kinds of situations, but it also teaches them like, "Hey, I love you enough to admit when I'm wrong." And to want you to know that I'm aware enough that I shouldn't have maybe said that, or maybe I should have approached it a different way, right? Kind of showing them that sense of humility goes a long way for that connection for our kiddos. And that's really what they need, because so often I felt like I had to be perfect. I had to, keep my stuff together. I had to make sure that nobody knew the struggles that I really was going through, because so often I felt like if they really knew, one, they probably wouldn't want me and then I'd have to move, or two, it would just, add on to the many lies that I already believe. But when we can say, "Hey, you're lovable. I messed up. I'm so sorry. I shouldn't have done that." It shows them that adults aren't perfect either. They don't have to be perfect, right? We all make mistakes, and it can be a really beautiful time to reconnect and repair that moment.
Yeah, absolutely. No, thanks for sharing that. So you have definitely experienced recovery and healing, and I imagine a huge part, I mean, you've already said this, is the way your parents responded and the way you guys kept talking. Were there other key things, along the journey that you can look back and say, "This really contributed to my healing"?
Absolutely. I mean, there were a lot of things. I feel like for my healing in general, first and foremost was found in God. I mean, there is nothing else that would have gotten me free from the trauma and from the chains that were bounding me and keeping me stuck in that pain, honestly. But I feel like in terms of what my parents did is they really invested a lot in my self-worth. And what I mean by that is, the way I saw myself was not where it needed to be. I thought I was a horrible person. I thought I was stupid. I thought I was never going to amount to anything, because my past experiences have kind of either directly or indirectly told me that. And we know a lot of our kids from hard places are struggling with this same sense of low self worth based on the experiences that they have had in their own lives. And so when we can get to the heart of the matter, which is the child's heart, right? When we can kind of drown out the lies, drown out the negative experiences they have had with truth and with love, and showing them that they are worthy, right? They have so much value. Because I promise you, if when I was younger, if my parents had told me, "Man, we love you so much, you've got so much value, God is going to do such great things with you," I would have been like, "I'm not lovable. God's got nothing for me, and what value do I have?" Right? And so them constantly speaking that life over me, constantly loving me, embracing me, and kinda just showing me that there's nothing I could do, there was nothing I could ever say that would cause them to stop loving me or change their love for me, and not just stopping at words, but living it out and proving to me time and time again. So I would say under God, attachment definitely was huge. I mean, until we have attachment, we don't have trust, we don't have self-efficacy, right? The ability to speak for what we need, right? Self-worth isn't there. So I would say God, attachment, self-worth, those are the biggest things. And, I know people are probably wondering, like, what did they do? What were the filters? What were the things that they kept you, how they keep you from it? But I always say filters and regulations and boundaries absolutely need to be in place, but they are a safety net. It is not the finish line. But what we do when we work with kids is we'll go through the book that I wrote when I was 18 called Battling the Invisible Enemy, and we go through the coping skills. We go through, how do we manage our stress? What are some alternate things that we can do when temptation arises? And then once we get through that, once they have kind of a kind of a solid foundation on what do I do when I'm tempted, then we immediately begin the self-worth work and the healing work that comes within renewing the heart and renewing the mind as well, helping them know and kind of unteaching everything that they have been through, and reminding them that, everything negative they believe about themselves is a lie. None of that comes from God. And we help show them where those lies came from. And it's so amazing to see how much that helps, how well they begin to receive that self-worth work. And my mom is a facilitator in what's called Making Sense of Your Worth. She runs classes that does just that, digs into the many lies from our past and tracks all the way back to the places and people that made us feel that way, and allows us to kind of give that back to them. And it's such work. So I would say we can't stop just at locking everything down and filtering everything, because here's the thing, at some point, whether they're an adult or whether with their friends, whether they're at camp, they will find it,
Yeah.
right? Pornography is filling some hole or wound that is much deeper than just simple, poor behavior choices. And until we fill that need, until we fill that gap that only Christ can fill, and love of family, and not just, you don't have to be adopted to have that close attachment, that close connection. It just takes one healthy, consistent person in your life that is there for you regardless. So having an attachment figure, having the healing found in God, and having someone pour into who you truly are, and helping you to undo and kind of unsubscribe from all of the many lies Satan is trying to deploy to keep us stuck in shame, keep us stuck in fear and in guilt, and helping us to undo all of that and stepping into the light of what God is really calling us to, and helping our children see themselves the way that we see them, the way that God sees them, and the way that we want them to see themselves.
Wow, that's so important. Well, we know that a 2023 study from Common Sense Media said that 73% of teenagers have been exposed to pornography, many by age 12. So we're going to assume that our listeners who have kids that age or older have already been exposed to pornography on some level. Um, it's a sad assumption, but we're going to make that assumption. So, how do you recommend now parents start this conversation with their children if they haven't already, and just continuing to keep in mind how they tackle it without shaming their child?
I think the best thing that you can do is just jump into the conversation. I would say start kind of broad with technology in general, kind of discussing, how with technology, especially nowadays, we got AI, we got phones,
Right.
smartwatches, iPads, we've got so much technology. Starting with how do we set boundaries with tech in general, right? What is the reason behind it, right? Because we can't just say, okay, you can't do this, you can't do this, don't do that. Kids need to know why, right? And part of answering that why kind of helps avoid doing it with shame, right? We want to get kind of technical, be like, hey, when we're on our phones or when we're on our iPads this much, out of the day, it does this and this to our brains, to our mood, to our sleep, to our academic performance, right? Kind of just getting broad and basic. And then as you feel they're able to handle it and understand the reasons why, it's not just that we're trying to control them, we're not trying to, make them the odd ones out in their friend group, right? They begin to understand why. And then we begin to expand upon that and be like, okay, well, now we want to talk about the fact that there are a lot of things out there in the world and online that are not healthy. Right. There are, inappropriate things that people are putting out there, and also just teaching them God's purpose and God's design for them, right? Teaching them, hey, God loves you so much that he doesn't want you to look at, things that are not so appropriate on the internet. And then I feel like, when we're talking about 12 and up, and if as long as you feel that they are socially and emotionally able to have that conversation, not if you're comfortable enough to have that conversation with them, but if the child is ready to have that kind of conversation, talking about them, what is pornography, right? And teaching them the words. We can't be afraid to talk about it and call it for what it is, right? Just telling them that there is inappropriate stuff on the internet that we want to avoid, right? We don't have to get super specific, right? Because we don't want to put that, taboo curiosity that's going to then make them go like, oh, well, maybe I'll take a look at what that really is. But really approaching it from like, you know, there's stuff on the internet that goes against what God says and goes against God's design for sex. And we know for our family, and because we love God, we want to put good things in our minds, and we want our hearts to be as pure as possible. We don't want to go near those kinds of things. And not only that, but having conversations and teaching them, okay, so if you see something online, if your friend shows you something, all right, and it makes you uncomfortable, come talk to us, right? It's so important that we have those open communication and those open conversations, because if our children don't think that they can talk to us about hard stuff and even the easy stuff, then they're less likely to come to us when that stuff does happen. And unfortunately, we do have to kind of assume that children at a certain age are likely to have already been exposed to pornography, right? And we can't unfortunately bury our heads in the sand any longer. We have to be able to talk about it, and we also have to tell them, like, if you see this, you know, we're here to help, right? That's again where we don't want to approach it with this shame-based mentality. Don't be like, if you see this, this is going to equal condemnation. You're going to have to repent for the rest of your life. We don't want it to frighten them to the point where if they're shown it, that they're too scared to come tell us, right? But we want them to know that it's dangerous, that it does damage, it goes against what God says, right? And so that way, if it does happen, right, you won't get in trouble, but we just want to help you and we want to talk about it with you. We have to approach this from a team-based mentality, because if it's us against our kid, we're losing that attachment, we're losing that connection, we're losing the trust and the communication, and they're just gonna kind of pull further and further away, whereas we want them to come closer, we want them to be able to confide in us. And so I would say, start broad, progress your way there. Don't be afraid to talk about it, right? And just keep having those conversations. As I said earlier, it can't be a one and done,
Yeah.
right? It can't be the way we treat the birds and the bees kind of talk, where we just say it once and then we're done, right? We have to keep talking about it. We have to keep engaging with them and saying, hey, how are you doing today? What are you interested on YouTube? What are you looking at online, right? And not only that, but being able to model that yourself, right? If we want our kids to have healthy and safe boundaries with technology, we have to model that for them. So if we're at the dinner table and we're constantly on our phones and we're telling them, hey, put your phone down, but we're still, Instagram or TikTok or whatever we're doing, we're showing them the exact opposite of what we want, right? So like if we're over at a friend's house and we're over there for a sports event, right? We paid for the Super Bowl or whatever it is. And, we're getting them together, it's just time to be social and disconnect from tech. And then we're sitting there stuck on our phones, right? That is not teaching our kids healthy ways to manage that. And so in addition to having conversations, having, rhythms and habits that are, for everybody, right? Joining in with them. So that way it's not like you're a child, so you have to do this. No, it's
Right.
we want to be healthy. We don't want to be dependent and addicted to our phones too. So we're all going to do this, right? We're even like creating like a family challenge, right? Because like for me, on Sundays, I put my phone on silent, I put it in a kitchen cabinet, and I don't look at it till the next day,
Yeah.
right? And around like 8:30, I try to set my alarm for the next day and I put it away, right? Setting those healthy
Yes.
rhythms. When you're out to eat, put your phone down, right?
Yes.
Have your kids put their phone downs. Even have your kids leave their phones in the car, right? Setting up opportunities where tech is not involved. And if tech is involved, let it be a way to have community, right? Play Mario Kart with your kids. My mom
Yeah.
played Lego Star Wars with me, even though she wasn't a fan of it. And she also wasn't very good at it either, but that's not the point, but, just if we're gonna engage with tech, let it be a time for
Yes.
connection, right? Have
Yes.
everybody vote on a movie, right? There's so many different things that we can do when it comes to tech, and there's a lot of different things that we can do when it comes to non-tech activities. I mean, there have been research studies that say, those who spend even 10 minutes outside a day tend to be a lot more productive and a lot more, energized and happy, right? God created nature for us to enjoy, for us to marvel at his good works. And especially in America, how often are we so glued to our phones that we miss it, right? And I'm not saying I'm perfect at it. I struggle with it myself too, because it's easy, phone buzzes, is that a text message? Is that an email? Especially as we're working. But it's one of those things that if we're intentional, if we're teaching our kids that intentionality and modeling that intentionality with our kids, we are setting them up to be honestly healthier, happier
Yes.
members of society. And not only that, but this day and age, a friend of mine, we were talking and we were like, people have lost the ability to be bored, right? Like if we
Yes.
don't want to, we don't ever have to be bored in our lives.
That's right.
And I can't remember the exact research study, but there was a research study that showed adults had a spike in cortisol, that stress hormone in their body, elevated as their phones reached 10% battery, because they associated with my phone's about to die with I'm about to be disconnected from the world, right? And again, I'm not saying that we just, forego all technology. We need it. It's just the way it's the way, our society functions, but we have to set boundaries intentionally, right? Instead of going to the phone, go for the Bible, right? Set a time every single day to be in God's word. Write a gratitude journal, right? There's cooking with your kids, right? Even if they're not that good at it, there's so many different things that we can do to really help. And then when we keep those conversations going, we're building in these activities, we're building in these rhythms, we're also building those body memories, which teaches kids, hey, not only are we talking about this, but we're going to show you how to, find enjoyment. How do we manage stress in healthier ways?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Like it is what I'm hearing so much of is it's not about being punitive. It's about connection and then modeling. And the modeling extends far beyond like I'm not
Right.
just not looking at porn, but I am modeling a healthy way of living. I love that. Um, okay, so there are different guardrail
Yep.
opportunities out there. Do you have any good recommendations of any that you do recommend, filters or just any of the practical things that you would recommend?
Absolutely. I would say that, I mean, I'm 25 years old and I still have restrictions on my phone. I have an iPhone. I go into the settings, I remove, certain things that, might be a temptation. Like I said, I haven't viewed pornography in well over a decade, but what I've also learned in this journey is that if we give the devil even a slight foothold, or if we leave that door cracked open, he will find a way to come back. And so I've just learned it's better to be proactive and stay ahead of things. So, I set the restrictions on my phone. I let my mom set the passcode so that way there wouldn't be any way to undo it. And it's just a way that I am dedicated to protecting myself, protecting my eyes and what I allow myself to engage in. But outside of that, outside of the settings that we can put on our phones, because let's be honest, kids are smart, they'll find ways around it. Covenant Eyes is also a really good one. I've been an accountability partner for quite a few people through Covenant Eyes. It works fantastic on the computer. Again, there are probably ways around things, right? It doesn't catch
Right,
everything, but it does a
right.
really good job of, every few seconds taking a screenshot of what's on your computer and setting it and flagging it to accountability partners. And not only that, but with Covenant Eyes, there are daily challenges, there are scripture verses, it's more than just a filter. And another one that I've heard of is Bark. They actually have a specific phone made for kids that can help them manage that. Those are the two that I know of being the best. But again, we can't just stop at filters, right?
Right,
We have to
right.
be continuing to work on the heart. But it is a great safety net because often what I do, and a lot of the kids that I work with have struggled with pornography or technology addiction in some way. And so what we often do is we say, hey, let's put on these filters. Let's find these coping skills, right? Let's do all these things so that way if you are tempted and you do stumble over that cliff, you'll be caught, right? You won't have a chance to fall deeper into that temptation and let that cycle deepen, right? And then let's work on the heart. Let's work on why are you seeking this? What need or what pain are you trying to fill or avoid? Because that's
Yeah.
honestly, I feel like one of the biggest reasons why people seek pornography is it's just a way to escape from the hard stuff,
Yeah.
especially when we don't know how to manage it or when it becomes too painful. So we can't just lock things down, but it is a great way to help protect our kids while we're working on the deeper stuff. And, and kind of touching back to the modeling, something else that my parents did and encouraged us to do was charge all our phones in one place, right? We charged all of our phones in the kitchen. We got one of those like extender outlet things that where he has like, six that you can plug in. Everybody put their phone in the kitchen and would charge it there. Cause I mean, there's so many different things, right? When we're having our phones buzzing all throughout the night, we're not getting good sleep. And for our kids from hard places, they're already struggling with sleep. They're already struggling with attention and memory and things like that. And when their phone is buzzing and then they're not sleeping, it makes all of that stuff so much worse. Not only that, but my parents always encouraged me to never have a tech device alone. Not in the bedroom, not in the restroom, nowhere, right? And so I started to, be intentional with like if I was heading to my bedroom for something or if I was heading, somewhere where I knew I would be by myself, I would take my phone out of my pocket, I'd place it somewhere and I would just go about my business. And I've even taught a lot of the kids that I've worked with, to put that into practice because, obviously we want to have a plan. We need to have a simple, concrete plan. So when our brains kind of go, when our thinking brain kind of goes offline and we're tempted and we're heading down that path, you know, we have a plan that's easy and concrete. Often, what I've said to kids, like, if you've got a phone and you're feeling tempted, treat it like a hot potato. Take it, toss it on the couch, toss it on your bed, and go find somebody. Go distract yourself. Go do something, right, that is healthy and going to help. And then from there, once you come into a place of regulation, you can go talk to your parents. I know it's uncomfortable. I know teens don't want to talk to their parents about that kind of stuff, but that's why we have to be intentional and we have to take the first step to have those conversations and show them that we can talk about this stuff. And it may be uncomfortable, but it's not going to be shameful. It's not going to be judgmental. It's going to be a collaborative thing that we want to do for ourselves. And also, if a caregiver has ever struggled with pornography and they have, gotten to a point where they've been avoidant of it for a long time, they're in a healthy place, being able to share in broad strokes, we don't want to share, the specifics, but just simply saying, hey, this was something I struggled with too, and it hurt me a lot. I don't want you to struggle with that. Here's what I did to help me. And that's actually where battling the invisible enemy came from, was me wanting to help other people through my own experiences. What helped me, what didn't, right? What were the skills that I used to help me get through that? And being able to share that with someone helps reduce the walls of isolation and shame. They're like, oh, so I'm not the only one who's dealt with this. Not only that, but it gives them hope to know that if they are struggling with it, that there is someone out there who has overcome it and that it is possible. Because I think for so often, for a lot of kids who have experienced trauma from hard places, myself included, it's so easy to lose hope, to think that I'm the only one out there who is struggling with this. I'm the only one who's been through this. No one understands. And
Right.
to a point, that is kind of true, right? Not every caregiver is going to be able to understand the exact experiences that their child has gone through. But that's why it's so important to find mentors, find community with people who do understand it and who are in a healthy place. Because obviously, the last thing that we want is for our kids to be interacting with other people or kids who are struggling, and that's going to just bring them
Right.
down. But finding people who have been through similar experiences and have been able to overcome it. And that's why I love the work that we get a chance to do, because every kid that I work with, whether they have been through neglect, domestic violence, maybe even sexual abuse or pornography exposure, I can look at them and say, hey, I've been through that. I know what you're going through. I know how that feels, but here's how I got through it. Here's what I did, right? And we're going to get through this together. It gives them that hope to know a tangible person who has been through it and who has been able to come on the other side.
Yeah. Wow. Trent, I love talking with you, and I still remember some of the things you shared in the episode we did a long time ago, about trauma healing and how you have to walk through it to heal. And I as you share, I'm encouraged, and it makes me also just wanna praise the Lord because you can just see how he has worked in you. You can see how healing is possible. Like, your life, what you're doing is a testimony of the grace and glory of God, and I thank you so much for that. And I just wanna ask one more question as we end here, because it is very easy as a parent to parent out of fear, and so often that is why we jump to the shame or the consequences or the punitive, um, because we're feeling afraid. And so I'm thinking of the parents right now who are in the middle of this battle with their kids. They are well aware that their children are struggling through this, or a child. How can they boldly face this topic with their kids and just keep the mindset, though, that we serve a mighty God who cares more deeply for our kids than even we do? I guess I'm just asking you to bring some final encouragement to those who are in the midst of this right now.
Absolutely. I mean, I would say we have to remember where healing comes from. It's not our job to heal our kids. We can't heal our kids. I mean, I know many parents who would like do anything to take away the struggles that their kids have, to do anything to take away the pain that their kids are facing right now. And we can't. Unfortunately, we can't. Only God can. And we have to remind ourselves and in a sense, kind of humble ourselves enough to say, I can keep, pushing tooth and nail and my own strength, and I'm getting myself nowhere, right? We have to continue to pray. We have to continue to love on our children, continue to just lean on God's understanding, even when it makes absolutely no sense to us. When we
Yeah.
feel like we have prayed and prayed and prayed for God to take away these addictions, to take away these struggles, to take away this pain, and it doesn't seem like it's going anywhere, we have to remember that God's timing is not our timing and his will is not our will, right? Obviously, he wills for our children to be free, to be healed, right? All that stuff. But how that goes about, how the timeline looks, is up to God, not us, right? And we can keep, encouraging our kids all day long, but until our kids are in a place where they want it for themselves, where they no longer want to struggle with it, right? Until they are invested, all we can do is love them, walk with them, tell them directly, like, we are here with you. Whenever you want to talk, we are here. We want to support you. We love you, right? And just knowing that, we have to show ourselves grace in this journey. It is a tough journey. It is a messy one. It's difficult, but we have to remember that God is the one that is in control, that God is close to the brokenhearted, right? He is the one that has overcome the whole world. He encourages us to take heart knowing that. And it's hard, right? We're human. We want control. We want to see results. But just continuing to go to God, spending time in scripture to remind ourselves where healing comes from, where strength comes from, and where wisdom comes from, and just being patient, right? And like I say, we come to dramatic levels of healing. I say even for myself, I will never be 100% fully healed this side of heaven. But when I do get to heaven, I know I will. But every child can come to dramatic levels of healing. How that looks is different for every single child. So I would also say, don't compare your healing to other
Wow,
people.
that's good.
Don't compare your child with other children, right? Don't compare the timeline or how fast or how slow with other people. Don't read stuff on the internet, because it's only going to steal your hope, right?
Yeah.
Find community with people who have gotten their kids through it, who have gotten themselves through it, and continue to understand the impacts of trauma and why they're more susceptible, right? This isn't just a poor decision. This is something that they are using to fill a deeper wound. And not only that, but also figure out what from your past may be blocking you, right? What from your past may be, inducing all of this fear inside of you, right? And that can be such a big thing, because we can do all the work on our kids all day long, but if we're continuing to run about the same patterns, we're only going to get but so far. But I would say to every parent who is working with a child who is struggling with this, thank you. Thank you for bringing this into the light. What you do is so hard, but it is sacred and holy work. And I want you to know that I see you. Now that I'm on the other side of this journey, I know how difficult this really is. So take heart, hold fast, and just know that God is working even when we can't always see it, even when we don't always feel it. He is working in the midst. And it kind of reminds me of the footprint in the sand poem, of how, like, we feel like we're going through all this stuff and, like, God, where are you? God, where are you? And God says, look back. How many footprints do you see? One. That's me carrying you through. And we have to remember that we surrender our kids over to God and allowing him to carry them through the healing journey, that we get a chance to walk with them, right? We're in this together. We have to do this together. We can't be against our kids.
Amen. Trent, thank you for being on today.
Absolutely. It is a huge, huge pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you again for listening today. I hope this episode resonated with you. Let us know your thoughts. We really love hearing from you. And as always, if you want to learn more about TFI, catch up on past episodes, read engaging articles, or partner with us on mission with a gift of any amount, head over to theforgotteninitiative.org. And until next time, remember, if you're feeling overwhelmed, misunderstood, or questioning, why am I doing what I'm doing? Remember, you have a whole community here who cares for you. And even more, Jesus is fully able to meet your every need. Lean on him and find rest in him today. I look so forward to being together again very soon.
resonate.